This episode is sponsored by Bulova. Since 1917, Bulova has defined women's timepieces. The Rubaiyat collection is the epitome of this timeless elegance, featuring diamond-studded dials, colorful leather straps, and modern metallic finishes. It's luxury that never goes out of style. Head to the link in the show notes to discover the Bulova Rubaiyat collection. Get 30% off site-wide until November 28th, 2025.
We're always delaying our happiness. We're saying, okay, let's just get through this right now. It'll work out in the end. And we just hold our breaths for this thing to happen. And in my work, understanding the science of happiness, I know there's a difference between this idea of happiness and this experience of joy.
Welcome to Ambition 2.0, the new podcast from Girlboss, where we explore what it really takes and costs to have it all in work, life, family, and self. I'm Amanda Goetz, your host. I'm a two-time founder, four-time CMO, mom of three, and author of the book Toxic Grit, How to Have It All and Actually Love What You Have. I am so pumped about today's guest because I have been stalking her on TikTok and one of my favorite TikTok binges, but she is a board-certified psychiatrist, a researcher, media expert who is making mental health accessible to a huge audience. Dr. Judith Joseph, welcome to Ambition 2.0.
Thanks for having me.
I want to just dive right in because I feel like I'm going to be seen, but also probably be called out in so many ways. You have the book High Functioning, which really dives into all things high functioning depression for ambitious women. Can you first just start by describing what high functioning depression actually is?
Well, to be honest, I didn't even know when I was experiencing high functioning depression. I was sitting at my desk in 2020 and I had all these degrees behind me. I was given this presentation to this major hospital system. And they were asking me things like, how are we going to get through this? Guide us through this crisis. And halfway through that talk, it hit me. I was like, I think I'm depressed. But I didn't look depressed on the outside. I had it all put together, all of these awards, always on TV, great research lab, wonderful career, perfect little family at home.
Yeah.
But I was experiencing something called anhedonia. And it's like this lack of joy, this lack of interest where you kind of feel meh, bleh. And it snuck up on me. Now, I study anhedonia. I research it in my lab. And many people don't know about it.
No.
But I think most people have experienced it. They just don't have the right words for it. They think that's just life. But that's not just life. We were built with the DNA for joy. We literally have it encoded in our DNA. So when we're lacking joy and we're feeling meh, blah, that's a red flag that something else is happening. So high-functioning depression often presents with anhedonia. People have all the symptoms of depression, like lack of joy or low energy, low motivation, probably issues with sleep, but they don't meet that final criteria. They don't check the box at the end of the list, which says you break down or you're in crisis. They're the opposite. They are showing up. They're overworking. They're coping with their pain by being busy. They're pathologically productive.
So why do you think that high achieving women seem especially vulnerable to this specific part of depression?
I think there's a lot of reasons that women are particularly vulnerable. In the research study that I did, the first in the world on high functioning depression, we found this high correlation between caregivers, anhedonia, and high functioning depression. And it makes sense, right? If you are coping with what's happening in life by focusing on others, by overworking, by putting other people's joy ahead of your own, then you are going to have that lack of joy. You are going to feel meh, blah, and you can't break down. You can't stop because others depend on you. And I think that's why a lot of women have high-functioning depression.
Oy, this is hitting home. So for me, I've had to find that, especially going through my divorce, I had to make joy not optional. I had to go seek it out, and it meant okay, I have to give myself permission to get the babysitter so I can go out with my girlfriends and not be in service to anyone else or go on a solo trip. But those feel like kind of like down the line things. What if someone's like listening to this and they're like, she's calling me out right now? What is the first step? Like, what would somebody need to start doing?
Well, I think a lot of us, we're always delaying our happiness. We're saying, okay, let's just get through this right now. It'll work out in the end. And we just like hold our breaths for this thing to happen. And in my work, understanding the science of happiness, I know there's a difference between this idea of happiness and this experience of joy. So I have a research lab and I have this private practice. And in the private practice, as a therapist, people will come to me, they'll say, oh, Dr. Judith, I just want to be happy. And then I ask them, okay, well, what is happiness to you? And they'll often say something external, like, when I get through this divorce, or like, when I finally find the love of my life, or when I get that job.
Like a checkpoint.
Yeah, it's always this external thing. The problem with that type of thinking is that if you hold your breath for these external things to happen, and then you wait to be happy, you're never going to be happy. The science shows us that people who have that delayed happiness mentality, they're still not happy even when those things happen to them, right? The difference between happiness and joy is it's like really, really subtle, but joy is that internal experience. It's your ability to connect in that moment. So in the research, when I'm measuring whether or not someone's actually becoming happy, I'll measure points of joy. So I'll ask things like, when you drank your coffee, did you savor it? Was it yummy? Or did you just guzzle it down, right? Or when you were really tired and you took a break, did you feel refreshed? When you were lonely and you reached out to a loved one, did you feel connected, right? Wow. Those are the points of joy that many of us leave on the table because we're holding our breath for this idea of happiness. So I want people to understand that really subtle difference, because when you think about it that way, joy is much more within reach, whereas happiness is, elusive, it's distant. Yeah. But if we can train ourselves to grab onto these points of joy today, we're actually becoming happier overall. So it's a game changer.
Yeah. When you're a doctor, you are big on social media, you are going around giving keynotes. What is a trick that you do to like pop yourself back in and be like, savor this or find the joy in this moment when you're running around?
Yeah, I mean, like recently my life has just been so fast, like getting so many opportunities. And it's easy for me to slip back into high functioning depression, right? So I have to remind myself about the methods I preach, right? The 5 V's, how to grasp joy, how to remember that it's built into my DNA. And if I don't pay attention, if I'm not present, if I'm chasing this idea of happiness, I'm going to lose sight of that joy.
Yeah.
For me, it's connection. I've understood the science of my happiness. I know that in all of the periods in my past where I was really depressed or high functioning depression, I was lonely. I wasn't connected. I wasn't really listening to the people in my lives. I wasn't feeling that sense of, we have a good relationship. So if I find myself slipping back into this high functioning depression and anhedonia, I tap into those relationships again. But for others, it could be different. That's why I say, try to understand the science of your happiness, because there's only one you and there'll only ever be one you. So really take the time to understand the science of your happiness. What makes you so different?
Yeah.
And then you can be strategic about how to reclaim that joy.
You just said it, and in your book, you talk about the 5 V's of healing. So it's validation, venting, values, vitals, and vision. Which do you think is the hardest for ambitious women, and why?
I think validation is really difficult. So I explain that validation is like turning the light on and acknowledging your feeling without judgment. And I use this analogy often because I think analogies are powerful. And my dad's a preacher, so I always use stories. But, like imagine you were in a room and you heard like this really loud crash and you didn't know what it was. You couldn't see anything. Well, some of us would start panicking, right? Running, screaming. Some would start swinging, but depending on your defense mechanism.
Right.
But if you turn the light on and you saw, like that lamp fell, it was just an inanimate object, I'm safe. That uncertainty goes down. That anxiety goes down. And you still have a problem, right? You still have to clean up the mess, but you know what it is. So you're taking away that stressor of like not knowing. So when you're able to acknowledge and name your feelings and your experiences, it's like turning the light on and saying, oh, this is what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
Right. And that's powerful because many of us walk around, will say things like, I'm so angry. I hear this a lot in my practice. I'm an angry person. I need help with anger management. But then when we turn the light on and we see actually the feeling is anxiety, then we know how to deal with it. We know how to approach it using the right tools. But if you're misnaming this thing as anger, you're not using the right tools. So validating and acknowledging how you feel is something many of us have a hard time doing because our coping mechanism is to push down the pain, push down the emotions. Don't deal with it. Deal with it later.
Yeah.
The problem with that is if you keep pushing down your emotions as a coping mechanism, you also push down the ability to feel joy. And then you end up with that anhedonia.
The turning the light on analogy is so powerful. Like for me, anger was the presenting emotion when something were to happen. And then after doing a lot of work with a therapist, I realized it was sadness. And I was too vulnerable to present sadness. So anger came out first. And it's like so real. I love that analogy so much. You talk about 3 kinds of masochism. And I love talking about masochism. I just think it's an interesting topic. So cultural, relationship, and career. I'd love to touch on career, but maybe you can touch on each of them.
So the interesting thing about masochism is that it was kind of this dirty word in psychiatry. I went to medical school, and then fresh out of medical school, I went into anesthesiology residency because it was prestigious and it was like they paid a lot of money, but I just found it very
sleepy.
Anesthesiologists, they do a great job. You need them. They keep you alive while the surgeon's cutting you open, but it was not for me. There's no creativity, at least enough for me, right? So I kind of fell into becoming a psychiatrist because a friend of mine, she was in psychiatry residency. She was like, oh, you should do this. You'd like this. And I ended up loving it. But going into psychiatry, I learned that masochism was a word that we don't use anymore. Like we don't, as therapists, we don't use it, but then we still use it behind people's backs, right? We still talk about it. We say people have masochistic traits, but you could never tell someone they're a masochist. So it's one of those interesting words. And I just thought I should bring this into the literature because I don't think people know this. And the word is problematic. So back in like the 80s, it was removed from the textbooks because it was thought to be victim blaming. And a lot of times,
interesting.
Yeah, a lot of times clinicians would say that women were masochistic and that they were inciting people to treat them poorly. So the old DSM criteria, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, would say that these are people who incite others to treat them poorly. So it's kind of victim blaming.
Yeah.
And there were other traits too, like they don't feel worthy of praise, they don't feel worthy of happiness, they bend over backwards for others. So essentially, because it was used to blame people who were in like domestic violence relationships, it got removed. It was politically incorrect. But I think, it should be removed. It's a terrible term, but there are elements of it that we need to actually reflect on. Right. And these are the masochistic traits. These are essentially what we call people pleasing these days, right? We bend over backwards, even though it's not reciprocal. See this a lot, particularly in caregivers. Many times it's, people who are people pleasing don't feel comfortable with praise. And, they're just not getting what they deserve in life. And they've just become accustomed to that. And I wanted to talk about that in relation to high functioning depression because there's an element of masochism there. You're delaying your happiness. You don't feel worthy. You keep working. And there's some unprocessed trauma where you don't feel as if you deserve rest. So you keep being busy. You feel uncomfortable when you sit still. You feel restless when you're not working. And that's why I brought up, okay, well, where does this come from? Culturally, many cultures around the world really do preach this message that, you're noble if you self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
Being a martyr is a good thing.
Right.
But it doesn't serve women very well. And it's not just women. I think there are, people who are male who are martyrs, but women tend to get the brunt of that culturally. Yeah. And then, from a relationship standpoint, again, we tend to serve others. And we're taught that we're a good girl if we bend over backwards. Yeah. It's a good trait. You're a good person, but not necessarily. you know? And then, from a workplace mentality, some of us do people please at work. The boss knows that if we are asked to work late and to do another project, we're going to do it. So I want people to really understand all of these angles of people pleasing and how they feed into high functioning depression and why you feel like you're unworthy of this joy, of this rest that you deserve.
What are the roots of the masochism across these different areas of your life?
Well, I personally, I think it's trauma. I've only done one study on high functioning depression. It's the only one in the world. There needs to be more studies. But what we did find was this high correlation between past trauma or past pain, emotional pain, and higher scores of high functioning depression. And when you look at trauma in the classic sense, like when you look at PTSD in the research, there are all these symptoms of PTSD, 30 plus symptoms. I think most people only know about like flashbacks, nightmares, and so forth.
Right.
But there are other symptoms like feeling unworthy, not being able to enjoy things, feeling as if the world is not a safe place. So I think when you don't process what's happened to you and you internalize it and you unknowingly or knowingly self-blame, then you end up making choices in life where you do end up as a people pleaser, where you are sacrificing your joy for someone who may not deserve it, right? Not that the other person's necessarily a bad person, but humans are designed to take if they're getting things.
Yeah,
and
people will always want more from you.
Yes.
Your kids will always want more from you. Your partner will always want more. Your boss will always want more. And I truly think it's on us to figure out where that line is. Obviously, you want to do a good job at work and you want to be a good mom and you want to be a great partner. But where's that line where it starts to teeter into this masochistic? And I think you touch on something that the visualization I always use is an iceberg, where there are all of these things that have happened to you that you keep below the surface and you think you're just operating out of these like, oh, I just have an anger problem or I just have this. And it's like, no, there's so much happening below the surface. And I'm glad you touched on the PTSD thing because I have always associated that with people who have like gone to war and, have had crazy experiences. And so I was like, okay, I had a fairly okay childhood and, my divorce was bad, but like he wasn't abusive or anything. And so it took me finding this new therapist to be like, no, you have PTSD. And I was like, no. And so I'm just glad you're talking about this because there are so many different forms of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely the PTSD in the classic sense. I think we need that for the research, but also at the same time, it can feel invalidating because many of us go through these traumas that wouldn't meet criteria for the classic PTSD, right? Classically, you need to have like a life-threatening or an assault or something like really dramatic.
Yeah.
And that's why I created that scale, the trauma rating scale, to include things that are not so traumatic, like things like divorce, which we know based on the ACEs survey and like pediatric patients is traumatizing. Like children who, not to say that divorce is a bad thing. I think it's definitely necessary in many cases. And it's so common, but two things can be true. It's also like traumatizing, right?
Yeah.
And these childhood questionnaires, they look at, children going through things like neglect, which again wouldn't necessarily be life-threatening, right? But it shapes you. It changes the way that you view yourself, the way you interact in the world. Things like divorce and so forth. So I wanted to include those in the adult trauma scales because divorce is traumatizing for adults too.
Yeah.
I know I went through one during the pandemic and I write about it in the book. And it's not like this.
That was a fun layered experience, right?
Yeah,
seriously. Man.
But yeah, I think, all of these things are validating, right? That first V. If you know that, okay, these painful emotional experiences that shape you and shape the way that you view yourself and the way that you interact in the world, those are traumas. And they lead you to sometimes internalize self-blame, internalize, this unworthiness, and that shapes the way that you interact and the decisions you make. I think that's validating. That's the first V. It may not be a big T trauma like being in war or life-threatening, but it does shape you. And it can lead you to make certain decisions
I hope a lot of people listening, I think they will feel very validated by you in this moment. So thank you. The second V is venting. And I want to talk about this because the word, at least my TikTok feed, I get thrown around trauma bonded a lot. So as a doctor, where's the line between trauma bonding and venting? And do you even like the word trauma bonding?
I use the word trauma dumping a lot.
Okay.
So venting is expressing your emotions.
Okay.
And in my lab, I'll have people come in and I like to do these science experiments where I have this big tank of water and I'll fill up this red balloon and people take turns trying to push this balloon into this tank of water.
Okay.
And 100% of the time, that balloon pops up and makes this big mess and there's water everywhere. Why? Because you can't outmath physics, right? And I use this analogy because then I'll ask people to deflate the balloon and try to push that deflated balloon into the water. And it goes all the way to the bottom of the tank. And, it's this imagery that's really helpful. Like, this is what happens when you bottle up those emotions and you don't express it in a controlled, authentic way. What happens is that they pop up
and make a mess
in your health, right? Make a mess, pop up in your relationships and make a huge disruption, right? Pop up at home in ways you can't control. So if you get into this practice of like slowly expressing your emotions and doing it in a way that is intentional, so it's not just like being squirted out everywhere, right? You do it in a way that's intentional. So you pick one or two people that you trust where there's reciprocity, where, you ask for emotional consent. You're like, hey, is this a good time? Can we do this now? Right.
Yeah.
And you have this intention of like, I want to come up with a resolution. I'm not just going to you to trauma dump and hear what I want you to say.
And mirror back to me my emotions.
Yeah. Like you're getting feedback that you're going to use in a way to resolve something. And listen, if you're with a therapist, you can, vent as much as you want. You're paying that
paying them. Yeah.
But if it's someone that's in your life and you want to have a healthy relationship, you should really be thinking carefully about how you vent. And, don't vent to your kids. Don't vent to your employees because that is not like a fair power dynamic.
Yeah.
But there are other ways to vent. You don't necessarily have to verbally vent. I work with a lot of neurodivergent clients and many of them don't feel comfortable necessarily talking about their feelings all the time. So they feel comfortable expressing it through, art or through writing in a journal or through even prayer. So you have to vent in ways that feel authentic.
I love that.
When was the last time you celebrated a career milestone? Not just a quick acknowledgement and back to work, but actually took a second to appreciate how far you've come. Like finally landing a raise, quitting that toxic job, or selling your company. Those are the moments in time worth keeping track of with a luxury timepiece. Bulova's Rubaiyat watches are not just pieces of jewelry. They're little celebrations on your wrist. From diamond-studded dials to colorful leather straps in modern metallic finishes in gold, rose gold, or silver, each watch is designed to stand the test of time and pair perfectly with every outfit, from the boardroom to brunch. And did you know that in 1917, Bulova introduced the first female-focused watch designs to the world? 100 years later, they're still rooted in empowered femininity. Today's collection fuses modern design with the artistry of true craftsmanship, and you can't put a price on that. So go ahead, celebrate your milestones, invest in yourself, because your time is yours. Head to the link in the show notes to discover the Bulova Rubaiyat collection. Get 30% off site-wide until November 28th, 2025.
In the book, you say one of the goals for high-functioning depression is also just becoming less available to toxic people. What advice do you have for people struggling with the feeling of duty around relationships? Maybe with parents or people who you feel this duty that you should have this relationship with versus the boundaries and protecting yourself?
Well, yeah, I have a newer experiment that I started doing when I give these talks. And like, I have this like big red magnet, and the magnet is going through all of these splinters of these like darker magnets, right? Like, the sand ones. And it's like, you think that you're just going through this room and spending time with people and it's not impacting you. And by the end of you circling that, you're like covered in these black splinters, right? And I think like these these type of experiments are powerful because you think that, oh, I'll just keep to myself. I'll just focus on myself. I'll be around these people. And you're not aware that that energy is so toxic.
You're picking it up.
You are so picking it up and you're carrying it with you, into your other relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think many of us can't cut people off. Like in my culture in the Caribbean, there's no such thing as that, right?
Yeah.
But you can set limits. You can say, I'm only going to be around this person at these holidays, or if I go, it's only going to be for this amount of time.
Yeah.
So, cutting people off is not a possibility for many of us. And also in certain relationships, it can be dangerous.
Yeah.
So just being aware of how are you going to set limits? How are you going to heal after that interaction?
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's great advice. How do traits like overworking, perfectionism, we've talked about people pleasing, but how do they intersect with depression?
Yeah, the overworking thing is something I had to really examine personally, but I see it in my clients a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think what happens is over time, you just forget who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And you just start to believe that your identity is your role. But you were someone before that role.
Mm-hmm.
You were someone before, you became important. And I've experienced that personally. Like after getting all of these awards, I worked so hard to get this lab. I worked so hard to establish my name as a scientist. And I started to believe that, well, I have to be serious then. Like I can't be fun anymore. And it just literally sucked the joy out of my personality. But I tell you, a divorce is a trauma that you can have some real post-traumatic growth from.
For sure.
And when I was going through my divorce, initially I felt really sorry for myself. I did everything right. How did this fail?
Mm-hmm.
But after a certain time, I was like, I'm just going to start having fun again. Who cares what people think? Started creating social media reels because I teach this course at NYU where I teach these doctors how to give these interviews on television. I've taught it for over 10 years.
Wow.
And then they were like, oh, we need to learn how to use socials. And I was like, well, I don't know how to use socials. And they were like, well, you got to learn it because that's how people
you do now.
Right? I tell you, your students will keep you accountable. So I had to start using socials and learn. I had to teach myself socials to teach my students, right?
Wow.
That's how it started. But social, it's so different than regular media. It's like night and day, right? Apples, oranges. So I had to start being silly. And some of my first socials were it was so cringe. And I was like, people are going to be like, what is this lady doing? She must be having a midlife crisis, literally, because you know how it is. And I was so concerned that they would judge me. But then I was just like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Who cares about this role of being serious, And initially people were hating. They were like, what are you doing? You're serious. What, are you trying to be an actress? I have a choice. I can be that magnet in this room picking up all this toxic stuff from people, or I can limit myself from these toxic haters and just hang out with people who celebrate, the funny parts of me. I'm not just this researcher. I'm also someone who grew up in a church with a pastor, with a big family, was always on stage in church performing, being silly with my siblings. And they don't know this part of me, right? And I just started tapping into that joy, that internal joy. And it took off in ways that, I would not have imagined. Who would have thought, right? I didn't. When I was making those cringy TikToks, I never thought it would end up like this. But had I listened to the dirty magnets in the room, they would have held me down, right?
You bring up a really good point about, I remember I grew really fast on Twitter first, which Twitter, you open yourself up to a lot of interesting people. And I remember one time I was getting a ton of hate. And I remember I had a group of people that knew who I was before anything else. And they're like, you're good. And I think what I took from what you just said too is that you surround yourself with people who know all of these parts of you. So you're reminded, no, you are silly and goofy and fun and doing this. And I think that's important because we can be pulled, especially in our career, towards the serious side. And then we surround ourselves with serious people. And then you're like, wait, I have all these other parts of myself. So I think that's really beautiful.
who is it? George Bernard Shaw said, you don't get tired of playing as you grow old. You grow old because you stop playing. And I always think about that because, had I not been playful, I wouldn't have been able to tap into this joy that I never thought would make me so happy, right? Because I was holding my breath for this idea of happy. But I was getting those things. I was married, kid, lab, career, but I still wasn't happy. And I had to take a step back, pause, and tap into the actual internal joy. That playful side that doesn't cost money, that is completely free. It's within me. It's in my DNA. I just forgot it.
Now it's making you money.
Seriously? I got a book deal. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, seriously. It's so entertaining. I love your skits and that you're talking about serious topics. And I can't even imagine when you're in it all day, especially listening to other people, how important it is. I say this to my therapist all the time. I'm like, I don't know how you do this all day. Everybody just coming in. So I think it's amazing. So let's to someone listening that kind of feels seen and also I think I need some help. I feel say the word again,
anhedonia.
Anhedonia. They're feeling the loss of joy. What's the kind of first path or even just what role do therapy or medicine play in all of this?
Well, I think therapy definitely can be helpful. But if you're waiting to start therapy or your therapist, I don't know, maybe it's not working, it's not a good fit. I think the 5 V's are really helpful. Validating, acknowledging what you're going through without judgment, venting and expressing it, if it's not to a friend or a loved one, to yourself, in your journaling. Values, tapping into things that give you meaning and purpose, not the things, I say values are things that are priceless, not with price tags, right? Because we're always chasing these things that we think will make us happy, but they're usually external, But the things that are internal are the things like your faith, your community, things like nature that many of us were too busy to even just stop and literally smell the flowers, right? So tapping into those, your vitals. I talk about vitals in ways that are different than most people in healthcare. Yes, there are the traditional ones you got to sleep, you got to eat well, you got to get movement. But, the non-traditional vitals I talk about are things like our relationship with technology. We're always on our phones. We're always on our screens. That's taking away our joy. Our relationship with others, longevity science shows us that that's really important in terms of our physical and mental health. And then our work-life balance. So those are the non-traditional vital signs. And then vision, my favorite V, the last one, celebrate your wins, plan joy. If you don't plan it, it is not going to happen. And people are oh, well, that doesn't sound very spontaneous. And I'm like, it's not. It really isn't. When you're a caregiver, you're working, you're doing so much, you have to plan joy. You have to carve out time and protect it. And it doesn't have to be the big wins. It could be the small
it's not just
thing.
vacation. What was the last thing you planned for joy?
Well, I have a ritual every day.
Okay.
After I drop my daughter to school, especially on the days that I have her, I'll sit in my living room and I have this coffee that I got from St. Martin, and I figured out a way to get it here. And it is it's not, there's no alcohol in it, but it's rum cream flavored. Ooh. It is so delicious. And I have it in my living room after I used to go straight from dropping her straight to the office. I just come home, have my coffee, and I just sit, and it's my time.
I love that.
And it's protected. Everybody knows that's my time. But I look forward to it every day. It's a win. I'm I got this kid to school on time. Her hair was combed. Her homework was done.
That feeling when you get the kid to school and they're look somewhat presentable. I'm I did that.
And with my team in my lab, when we finish a study, it's not just on to the next. We celebrate it.
Yeah.
And it's small. Right in our lab, we'll just be let's have some, we have this French bakery downstairs that we love. We'll get the babka and we'll split it and it's just acknowledge we did it and then on to the next, right? But it's not just okay, we did it and then on to the next. It's we did it, celebrate the win, now on to the next.
If someone's listening and they're thinking about a friend, like they're listening to that, they're like, that's my friend or a family member or a colleague who truly is struggling from all of these things we just talked about. What do you think the right pathway is to maybe approach them or help them see kind of some of these things? Or is there advice there?
I think that's the number one question I get asked, like literally whenever I talk about this, because whenever people hear me talking about this, they're like, I know someone just like this, or it's me, right?
Right.
But if it's not you and it's someone that you love, just know that that person is likely not meeting their basic needs, right? They're like running on empty. They're thinking about everyone else but themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So try to like support them by meeting their basic needs. They're likely not eating well or eating highly processed foods.
Yeah.
So a way to show support is to like bring them something healthy. There's so much evidence, and I talk about this in my book, about how certain things that you eat support your brain health, decrease inflammation.
Yeah.
Studies show that they actually make you sleep better, focus better, feel better.
Yep.
Many times people who are high functioning are just not taking care of themselves. They're eating a lot of things that are not healthy, right? The other thing is that they don't feel worthy of rest. So, if you say things to them like, oh, you're working too much, they're going to internalize that as a blame, right?
Yeah.
They're going to say like, oh, I'm making you worry. And then they're not going to share with you because they don't want to be the burden. They don't want to create issues for others. And their whole identity is tied into being this rock.
Yeah.
So then you're chipping away at their identity and making them feel bad. Two things that they're not comfortable with, right? So take things off their plate without saying the obvious, right? Deep down, they know they're doing too much. But, don't be a taker.
Yeah.
Don't be one of the people who benefits from their masochistic behavior, right? Like, just say, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to, take over this task for you without question. And also, like, not everyone who has HFD is necessarily like a good person, right? So like if the person is in your life and they have HFD, but they're also pretty toxic, then you got to take care of yourself too.
Gotta move your magnet away.
You do. And I often say that like joy is contagious. So if you see someone joyful or you work with someone joyful, it kind of rubs off on you. Anhedonia is contagious too. So like you don't want to necessarily have your joy robbed because of, proximity. Not to say that you're not helping someone who's struggling, but you want to also think about yourself. So take care of you first.
You just made me think of something that I had to work through. So when I was kind of vibrating at a low place, like divorce and 3 young kids, and I started to attract other people who were also in low places, and we were all kind of like in it together. And then I started to climb out of that low place. And there was a part of me that felt bad because I was like, oh, we were in the trenches together, but they were still vibrating really low. And I was really trying to come out of it. And I think it's I think friend breakups are like a whole other podcast that we could talk about. But this idea of thinking about that magnet and being like, no, you got to protect yourself because it is contagious.
Yes.
Joy as well as the lack of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you've ever been to a workplace where the boss was like not happy, people are not happy.
Yeah.
But if you go and the boss is like joyful, you see people are joyful. It is contagious, not like a virus, but in the way that most behaviors spread culturally, right?
Yeah.
So
how did you go from this, and now you're talking about hormones a lot.
Yes.
So how did that connection happen?
Well, in my lab, I do a lot of research in postpartum depression.
Okay.
And I've been doing those studies for since over 6 years now. And some of the first studies for the only FDA approved drug for postpartum, like the only one, were done in my lab.
Wow.
Along with other labs around the country. But when I started seeing patients who were going through postpartum and they're older moms, and then also like going through perimenopause and seeing the similar symptoms, I was like, oh, there's something to this. And that got me to understanding that, these windows of hormonal fluctuations and hormonal vulnerability happen throughout an entire lifetime. So when you think about PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, in women, typically you'll see this, and I see this in my adolescent patients and young adults, but you go through these waves during your period, leading up to your period where you're getting really anxious, really depressed, moody. And it's beyond PMS. It's like literally some of my clients could not go to work or school.
Wow.
So it was severe enough to warrant that diagnosis. And then you see these patients over time, and then these are the same people who are then more vulnerable during a postpartum period because, again, hormonal fluctuations can alter the way you feel about yourself, your energy and so forth, your anxiety. And then as you're going through midlife, you're seeing this again. So it's looking very similar across these really unique windows of vulnerability. And that led me into that work. And also, most medical students are not taught about perimenopause or menopause.
No.
And, we really have to go out and teach ourselves in medicine. So I found myself having to learn about this for my patients and then developing an expertise out of necessity just because there wasn't anything out there.
Yeah.
And it led me to wonderful
on
advocates.
Oprah's panel.
I mean, I didn't see that coming.
I know. That was incredible.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
I still can't believe I was on that show. I was when I got that call and they had been trying to reach me. And and I saw it.
They're like,
fake.
Dr. Judith, Oprah's calling you?
I thought it was
You want to pick up?
Because seriously, on socials, you get these spam requests all the time. And it's always Oprah spelled Orpa. And you're like, oh, that's fake. So I thought it was fake. So I wasn't even responding to it. And they were like, Oprah's trying to reach you. You better call back. And I was like, what?
My gosh. What did you do when you found that out?
Oh, I was shocked. I was stunned.
Did you celebrate?
Of course.
Yeah.
I've been watching Oprah since I was a little.
I know.
I was in high school running home, watching General Hospital. My sister and I, we had General Hospital and then Oprah. That was our routine, coming home from high school. But yeah, that was awesome. And
we were all raised on soap operas.
Yes.
No wonder.
They don't make them like they used to.
No. Those were crazy soap operas. No wonder I got a divorce.
No wonder we're so dramatic.
Right. Okay. Let's move into a little rapid fire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, you already answered the first one. First thing you do to start your day. You shared your coffee ritual, but what's the first thing you do when you wake up?
Well, I grew up very religious, so I'm more spiritual than religious now, but I literally thank God that I woke up, right?
It's beautiful.
So
first thing you notice when someone walks into your office?
Oh, usually it's their eye contact. I do a lot of socials about something called the mental status exam and how as therapists we look at the full picture.
Yeah.
And it's not just what you're saying, but it's literally everything in between.
Oh my God. Now I'm was I looking at her when she walked in?
Well, you're not my patient. So I wouldn't be analyzing you.
Good. Okay, great.
So when it's real people, I'm oh, I like those pants. That's what I thought.
Therapy homework you wish everyone would try.
I think metacognition is, first of all, people don't know what it is.
Yeah, what is that?
But I shrink myself using metacognition. So people know what CBT is, cognitive behavioral therapy is, change the thought, then change the feeling, then the behavior. But metacognition is a newer form of CBT where instead of trying to change the thought, you're changing the way you think about your thinking. Wow. So I'll give an example. Let's say you're worried about a meeting or a presentation later that day. Rather than saying, oh, let's challenge that thought of I'm worried about this presentation, not doing well. Let's acknowledge that thought is there and let's not try to change it. So imagine that the thought is an elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So the elephant is in the room doing their work on their laptop and so are you. So you know that thought is there.
And you're
you're not
thought.
changing it yet. It's there. I'm not changing it, but I'm going to focus on the task at hand. It could be actually working on the presentation. And you're acknowledging, okay, that thought is still there, but I'm going to wait. And I'm going to worry about that thought during my worry corner time of the day. And it's a time of the day, every day, in the same place every day, you pick the same time, same place, and that's where you're going to worry. So the worries will pop up during the day, put it on a list, okay, I'm worried about
this.
Yeah, and I'm going to worry about that during my worry corner time. But I'm going to keep working now. And then the studies show that if you train your brain to kind of shelve the worries and then you worry during that worry procrastination time that you're actually, by the time you get there, you're like, why was I so worried? Like, that's stupid. Like,
I'm going to do this.
No, it works. It works.
I need a lot of notepad. Okay. Which one do you think is a more common client feeling? I'm exhausted by everything, or I'm not enough?
Oh, that's a good one. I think lately people have been feeling like super exhausted.
Yeah, just everything.
Yeah.
What's worse for your brain, lack of sleep or too much stress?
Lack of sleep, because too much stress leads to lack of sleep, but lack of sleep for other reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sleep is one of the things that if you don't get good sleep, your lifespan literally gets cut short.
Yeah.
And you break down, you don't get, your immune system, everything. You look older, everything falls apart.
Yeah. I'm trying to teach my kids this. Like, I learned that at a very young age. And then part of my last company I worked with sleep doctors. And I was like, you will be smarter just because you got a good night's sleep. Like, you will. Yeah. So what's one therapy speak phrase you wish you could remove from TikTok?
That one's hard. There's so many.
We're throwing them around left and right, and none of us are doctors. So which one would you be like, I wish only doctors could use that one?
Because that one's really hard. There's so many. There's narcissism, but then there's triggered.
Yeah. Triggered's a good one. I feel like that's used a ton.
It's used a lot.
Yeah. Your go-to mood booster when you've had a tough day?
Oh, so I love matcha.
Okay.
And I like a cold iced matcha.
Yeah. Your rituals are like you have a ritual. Yeah. You're connected. Yeah. I love that. What's more healing, a good cry or a good laugh?
A good laugh.
Yeah. One last one piece of mental health advice you would give your younger self.
Oh, wow. Like, no one has it figured out. You don't have to be perfect.
I love that. Literally, I'm just so grateful for you. Your content has helped me, and I know it helps so many, and even just like your hormone content as I'm heading into this next phase of life. So I love your brain. I love how you show up. You're making a huge impact on this world. So thank you so much for being here. Dr. Judith Joseph, that is another episode of Ambition 2.0. If you have questions about anything we talked about, drop them below and we will dive into this more. But if you haven't checked out our book, High Functioning, get it, learn about it, and we will see you next week on Ambition 2.0.
Thanks for having me.